All right, everyone, this is an age-old sort of tale within U.S. politics especially, which is that when something comes roaring up into public consciousness, especially based on a traumatic event, a shooting, and homicide, massacre or something, usually groups responsible for offering reform, number one, they tend to be grifters, they tend to be opportunists, they're really after it for money. And number two, the initial mandate that they're given, they tend to overextend on, piss away the mandate, and lose favor. We've seen this, for example, with gun control in the country. After Parkland, after numerous shootings, during the Obama administration, this was a big thing. Obama and the other Democrats would saber rattle and say, we need more gun control, we need more gun control. What would happen is that at first, when you're just talking about the general concept of trying to stop violence in a vacuous manner, with sloganeering and no actual platform, that's popular. Once, though, they felt that it was popular and got the mandate, they started putting forth their proposals, and they would get incrementally more and more draconian to the point where the vast majority of the population doesn't support it. The majority of the U.S. population does not want to be limited to BB guns and pop guns and potato guns and stuff like that for their self-defense. They want to be able to defend themselves. With BLM, they started off with approval, even among white Americans, that was in the high 60s, many months ago, when George Floyd was first, well, not killed, he died of an overdose, but when he was knelt on and had a massive coronary, and, it was negligence because they didn't immediately get a medical help. They should have known, they should have known from the first moment that he was having a health issue and was high as balls out of his mind. Maybe you need to train police in recognizing the signs of a severe overdose. Isn't there a shot they can give you in these cases? Why don't officers carry one of those around? I can't remember what the actual drug is called. It's an opiate blocker, and it can actually save someone who's like lethally overdosing. I've seen it. It's amazing, actually. It only takes about a minute to fully wake the person up. It's insane. I think they inject you directly into the heart, which is pretty crazy. But anyway, now they've got 39% approval, and this is an AP poll. Now keep in mind, in the aggregate it's a bit higher, but some of those polls were conducted weeks ago. It looks like fairly recently BLM support among all Americans as a whole has crashed, and it's no longer just among white or Republican Americans. Like that happened, as early as August. It looks like now increasingly Hispanic and Asian voters are turned off by the idea of BLM, and I think ultimately it has to do mostly with property damage. I can't imagine that it has to do with any gung-ho thin blue line stuff that's going on, and this is the funny thing, because it was entirely predictable. And the Democrats have hitched their wagon to this particular horse. I'm sure that they regret doing so. There's a reason why Trump has managed to regain most of his lost support over the prior months. There's a reason he's rising up towards 46 again, and the Democrats appear unable to stop him. Whoops. I think it's related to employment. A lot of the small businesses in inner cities that have been damaged, they happen to be owned by people who are non-white. When they are in contact with their community, they're more likely to be part of, especially an online community, of people of similar ethnic background. So if you have a Hispanic shop owner, they own a bunch of gas stations and a couple of them go up and smoke. They're in Kenosha, they're in Chicago or whatever, and they share that online and say, look, it's not just white supremacists or something. This gang of BLM members came, and there were a bunch of communists, and they threw a Molotov cocktail, blew my gas station up. I've lost millions of dollars. Here's my GoFundMe. You can help me rebuild from the charred wreckage. That affects other people disproportionately. It's not the same as if I do commentary, because I'm white. I'm white. I'm usually not going to be from those communities. When it is a person from the community, from the same ethnic background as that neighborhood or that part of a city, it has a disproportionate impact. That's what we're seeing here. That's what we're seeing. That, and also, I think, the rise of the independent community in media, as opposed to the very sanitized crap that you get from CNN or MSNBC or some of these legacy outlets, from the New York Times, the Atlantic, the Washington Post. People are beginning to ignore them. For months and months, they've called these riots, mostly fiery but mostly peaceful. 85% of these people weren't rioting, they were just holding signs and stuff. Yeah, it was only 1,000 people that were running through the streets bashing out car windows. Don't you think that in these inner city communities, which tend to be majority-minority, when a bunch of white people with commie insignia show up and smash out car windows and loot businesses, don't you think that maybe it makes them not like these groups quite so much? I think it does. The idea of a homogenous ethnic voting bloc might end because of things like this. It's just like gun control. Gun control has peaked in popularity long ago and begun to dwindle again. 5 million new Americans, presumably, based on background check totals, now have guns. The newly minted gun owners in America, now most of these people, they're not like ammosexual, they're not like buying 10 pairs of body armor and helmets and a gas mask and stuff, but they've got a firearm. Well, they're not going to want that firearm restricted in its use, because what they've seen is that when they call the cops, you know, the old liberal line, just call the police, you don't need a gun. It's like, you know, you don't need a fire extinguisher, just call the fire department. It doesn't work. Because when the rioting begins, the cops don't show up for half an hour. You're home, your business is already gone. Your wife is already lynched. You're already beaten to a bloody pulp. Well, you know, the gun responds a lot faster than the cops do. And the cops, by the way, they use guns. They have them for a reason. The liberals are very, very upset about this. BLM has worn out its welcome in the country. You can expect, based on new polling, once they get a couple more polls corroborating this, you can expect the Democrats to drop like a goddamn hot potato, because there'll be political baggage. And BLM, at the end of the day, they don't worry about this. Do you think the organizers of BLM are upset at the fact that the majority of Americans disapprove of their rioting? Of course not. They've already made their money. They've already gotten huge amounts of money bundled for ActBlue for the Democratic Party. Tens of millions of dollars. They've already served their purpose. And in a couple more years, they'll fixate on the next police shooting. They'll ignore every police-involved shooting for the next 2 years. Midterms will be coming up a few months before. Some person will get shot, and they'll make sure to amplify it using their craptivistic networks, and then they'll make more money. And then there'll be a flash in the pan. They'll talk about police brutality. Nothing will be done, because they will immediately start rioting, and the average Americans will slowly be petering out in their support of the group. Politicians will make a lot of money, the organizers will become even richer, and then rinse and repeat in the next Maine election in 2024, and so on down the road. There are plenty of right-wing groups that do this too. Oh my God, you must send my... We're fighting an intergenerational battle against some perceived evil. Well, the solutions that they offer never solve anything. Most of the time, they're never even taken up seriously as solutions in the first place by a voting body. You look at the attempt to defund and disband the police in Minneapolis. It's fallen completely flat, to the point where the council there is apologizing for ever supporting the fucking thing. When you get an all far left council from a major inner city saying, no, sorry, this isn't going to work, that's the writings on the wall, dude. It's like when Bernie's bros crowd in Vermont tried to force Shumlin to get universal health care in Vermont, and they spent $1 million and hired Jonathan Gruber, the architect of Obamacare, who embezzled hundreds of thousands from our state, got sued and had to settle with them. They still couldn't make it work. They figured out that they'd have to bankrupt the state in order to do it. Everyone would leave. Nobody would have any money. It's impossible. Well, the writing's on the wall. The math is already there. It's funny that Bernie's proposed healthcare plan is actually completely negated if you look at a study that was conducted by entirely sympathetic, all-Democratic individuals led by a dude who engineered Obamacare to the tune of $1 million in one of the most blue states in the goddamn country, with, by the way, one of the healthiest populations that therefore is the cheapest to potentially care for. I think that's hysterical. They couldn't even offer a public option in the general sense. That comes from the exchange. BLM is basically the same. It's basically Al Sharpton 2.0. Sharpton and his mafiosos used to do this like back in the 70s and 80s and the 90s and stuff. They've sort of petered out now. Now they prefer to go to BLM rallies because it's more lucrative. They're barely just bundling most of this money through ActBlue for the DNC. And then they take their cut. Basically, they get to throw bottles of piss and Molotov cocktails and get paid to do it. Why they've got a pretty sweet goddamn fucking job now, don't they? I'm not surprised that Hispanic Americans especially have shown a marked swing away from supporting this group. This presages what I've said now for years, which is that there will come a time at which significant political shift is going to happen among Hispanic populations. The old universal class consciousness of Hispanic-ness has been broken down over time because of differentials in wealth, because of geographic differentials, because of the burgeoning white Hispanic thing that was even trotted out by the left when it came to George Zimmerman, you may have remembered. That opened a whole can of worms. They had no choice but to try to cast him as a Ku Klux Klan Confederate flag toter, and they accidentally torpedoed long-term the class consciousness they were trying to build for voting purposes over the last 20 years. Very, very interesting how that happened now, isn't it? That's about all. Peace out.